So before I start, disclaimer lang na itong chemistry refresher video na ito, this is tailored for engineering board exam, specifically for ECEs. So lahat ng i-discuss ko are just basic principles that I think is enough for the board exam. Okay, so let's start. So yung chemistry is the branch of science that deals with the study of matter. And matter is anything that has mass and occupies space. So basic lang. So we know that the three states of matter are solid, liquid, and gas. Now let's add the fourth state of matter, which is plasma, and the fifth state of matter, which is Beck or Bose-Einstein condensate. Compare muna natin yung solid, liquid, and gas. Kapag solid, yung particles are packed closely together. So yung particles niya vibrates back and forth but remains in their fixed positions. So it has definite shape and definite volume. Yung liquid, may definite volume siya and it conforms to the shape of its container because its particles are now loosely packed and can move more freely compared kay solid. Third is yung gas. Its particles are now moving constantly in all directions. Meaning to say, yung particles niya, they spread throughout the container, hence wala siyang definite shape or definite volume. Okay? So next is yung plasma, the fourth state of matter. By definition, plasma is an ionized gas. So what do we mean by that? Say for example, may ice ka, and yung ice is in the solid state. Now what will happen if we add energy? And by that, I mean increasing the temperature. So yung ice, which is solid, will melt and become liquid in form. Tama? Now what will happen if we add more energy to it? Yung liquid, mag-evaporate, magiging gas. Now what will happen if we add more and more and more energy to it? So hold that thought, may explain lang ako first. Di ba yung matter may atoms? Say for example, ito ay isang neutral atom. Meaning to say, the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons. Okay? Tapos yung atoms may valence electrons, yung nasa outermost shell. Tapos di ba, itong mga valence electrons, they can break free if may enough energy sila to do so. And once they break free, itong neutral atom na ito, we now call it ions. Again, once itong mga valence electrons mag-break free, we now call this an ion. So back to our question. From solid, naging liquid, naging gas. What will happen if we add more and more energy to it? Yung valence electrons ng atoms ni gas will gain enough energy for them to break free. And once those electrons break free, yung gas becomes ionized gas. And by definition, what is an ionized gas? Plasma. So recap. Solid, you add energy, it becomes liquid. Add more energy, it becomes gas. Add more and more and more energy, it becomes plasma. So make sense? So lastly is ang Bose-Einstein condensate. Yung Beck is kabaliktaran lang niya ni plasma. If a plasma is a very hot gas that has a lot more energy in it, yung Beck naman is a gas that is made very cold that is near absolute zero temperature. Okay, so that's it for the states of matter. Now let's talk about the types of matter. Matter can be classified as either pure substance and mixture. Yung pure substance can be divided into two basic types, elements and compounds. Yung elements, ito yung nasa periodic table of elements like oxygen, hydrogen, helium, and carbon. Yung compounds naman, these are two or more elements combined chemically. For example, H2O, CO2, sodium chloride, hydrogen chloride. Next is ang mixture. Under mixture, may homogeneous and heterogeneous mixtures ka. So homogeneous mixtures, dito nagfa-fall yung solutions. So ang homogeneous mixtures, ito yung mga solutions natin and by definition, it is uniform all throughout. So if may something solid ka na imimix mo sa something na liquid, expected na yung something solid ay magdi-dissolve siya sa liquid. Tama? So kapag yung something solid mo ay hindi mo na siya ma-distinguish after mixing, then that's considered as a homogeneous mixture. For example, salt and water. After mixing, you can no longer visibly see or distinguish ang salt dun sa water. Pero, if after mixing two substances, for example, substance A is mixed with substance B, kapag easily identifiable lang which is which yung mga substance, then we call those heterogeneous mixture. Pero may plot twist. Kasi yung colloids, these are heterogeneous mixtures that looks like a homogeneous mixture. Again, yung colloids ay under heterogeneous mixtures, pero kapag tignan mo siya using your naked eye, yung physical appearance is parang homogeneous solutions lang. So how do we differentiate colloids versus homogeneous solutions? Ito yung mga differences nila, and I got this from one website. Tandaan nyo na lang class na yung colloids scatter light, and yung scattering of light is known as Tyndall effect. While homogeneous solutions does not scatter light. Okay? So yung last type of heterogeneous mixture is yung suspension. Yung particles ng isang suspension settle at the bottom. Ang suspension ang pinakamadaling i-identify kasi kitang-kita natin yung mga different components na ni-mix. For example, sun and water or oil and water. If you mix those things, you can easily distinguish between the sand and water and the oil and water. Yung next na pag-uusapan natin ay yung phase changes. Bali yung kailangan nyo lang dito is familiarization kung ano ang tawag sa each process. So for example, solid, liquid, gas. From solid to liquid, melting. Liquid to solid, freezing. Liquid to gas, vaporization. Gas to liquid, condensation. Solid to gas, sublimation. Gas to solid, deposition. Gas to plasma, ionization. And lastly, plasma to gas is recombination. So again ha, familiarization lang ng process yung need dito in case na itanong siya sa mga objective type of question sa board exam. Next is we will discuss the properties of matter. So may dalawang types of changes tayo. The physical change and the chemical change. Yung physical change, basically this is a type of change where there is no new substance formed. So yung chemical composition niya remains unchanged. For example, may ice ka which is solid, then nagmelt siya to water which is liquid. Definitely nag-change ang kanyang form which is from solid to liquid, but the chemical composition remains the same which is still H2O. Make sense? Now, yung chemical change naman is kabaliktaran lang yan ni physical change. So you have a new substance formed and the chemical composition changes. For example is yung rusting of iron. So you have here iron, pero once nag-rust siya, it undergoes chemical change, so may change in chemical composition. So from iron, naging iron oxide after rusting. So new substance is formed. So ano ba yung mga physical and chemical properties? So these are some of the examples of the physical and chemical properties. So kung mapapansin nyo, yung chemical properties, most of them ay may iti sa dulo. Iti. Okay? So last is, yung physical properties natin, you can further classify those as either intensive or extensive properties. Yung intensive properties, these are properties that does not depend on the quantity of matter. So wala kang care sa size of matter. So for example, boiling point. So kunwari may isang basong tubig ka, may isang kabon ng tubig ka, at may isang balde ng tubig ka. So, irregardless kung gaano karami yung tubig mo, yung boiling point na property nila is still the same which is 100 degrees Celsius. Okay? So, yung extensive properties, ito yung mga properties that depend on the amount of matter like mass, volume, length, width, and surface area. Now, let's talk about the history of chemistry. Now, may short version and extended version ako. Yung short version is ito. Si Democritus ay isang Greek philosopher who came up with the idea of atoms or atomos. John Dalton is the founder of atomic theory. J.J. Thomson discovered electrons. Ernest Rutherford discovered protons. And James Chadwick discovered neutrons. And that's it. Balitong short version na ito, is para dun sa mga tinatamad na and gustong direct to the point na lang, which is okay lang. But I suggest you finish the video and listen to my extended version para at least, di ba, mag-make sense yung mga names na minememorize nyo. Okay, so here we go. So si Democritus, isa siyang Greek philosopher, and sabi niya na if may stone ka daw and cut it in half, and then cut it in half until you reach the point that it could no longer be divided, yung point na yun is what he called the atomos, which means tiny, indivisible, solid object. So after many years later, yung nag-conduct talaga ng experiments ay si John Dalton. Kaya tinawag siyang founder of atomic theory. So itong 4 na statements na ito yung parang findings niya. So basahin nyo na lang, class, medyo self-explanatory din naman to. Okay? So next is we have William Crookes. So si William, nag-experiment siya. The cathode ray tube experiment. So ang ginawa niya is that ang both ends nito ay kinonect niya sa isang battery, tapos na-observe niya na may ray coming from cathode going here. Hence the name cathode ray kasi yung ray ay galing sa cathode. So during this time, they already know that like charges repel and unlike charges attract. So William wanted to prove na itong ray na ito are composed of negatively charged particles. Kasi if negatively charged particles ito, this would explain why they are attracted to the positive terminal. Problema lang is that William Crookes cannot prove it. The person who was able to prove it was J.J. Thomson. So what J.J. Thomson did was that he performed the cathode ray tube experiment. But this time, he took a rod that is negatively charged. So isipin nyo na itong rod na ito ay puno ng mga negatively charged particles. And what he did was that nilapit niya yung rod dun sa ray. And ang nangyari is that yung ray is nag-deflect, which ultimately proves that this ray is composed of negatively charged particles dahil yung rod and yung ray repels from each other. And yung negatively charged particles, ayun na yung electrons na alam natin ngayon, which is why J.J. Thomson is called as a person who discovered the electrons. Okay? Now, kung may cathode ray, may anode ray naman tayo, class. So, si Eugene Goldstein, he performed the same experiment, pero dahil very observant siya, na-realize niya na may ray of light din na galing from anode papuntang cathode. So, from anode to cathode. Hence, tawag niya doon anode rays. So, yung anode ray are positively charged particles and may consist of many other particles aside sa protons. So, isa yan sa mga reasons kung bakit hindi si Goldstein ang tinawag na discoverer of protons. Okay, so anyway, balik tayo kay J.J. Thomson. Now, si J.J. Thomson, he is aware na yung atoms are composed of positively charged particles and negatively charged particles. Pero gusto niya, gawan ng model yung atom para at least, di ba, ma-imagine niya. So, yung model na nagawa niya is yung plum pudding model. Tinawag niya itong plum pudding model kasi para siyang plum pudding. So, yung pudding as a whole ay yun yung positive particles, while yung plum ang mga negative particles. So, isipin nyo na lang, class, na kung watermelon pa, yung red ng watermelon ay ang positive charges, while yung mga seeds ng watermelon ay yung negative parts. So, next is Ernest Rutherford. So, si Ernest Rutherford, he is aware of the plum pudding model and gusto niyang i-verify if legit ba yung model. So, he performed the gold foil experiment. And what he did is that may gold ka, tapos mag-i-emit ka ng mga alpha particles or positively charged particles dun sa gold. Now again, yung plum pudding model ay nagsasabi na ito lahat dito sa may outer part ay positive charges. So if you are to inject positive particles papunta dito, then yung expectations natin is dapat magre-repel sila kasi like charges repels. Tama? Positive, dapat mag-repel. However, iba ang nangyari. Rutherford observed that most of the positive particles that he injected passed through while may konti na nag-deflect. So he came up with 3 conclusions. Number 1, Most of the atom's mass and its entire positive charge are confined in a small core called nucleus. The positively charged particle is called the proton. Number 2, most of the volume of an atom is empty space. And number 3, the number of negatively charged electrons dispersed outside the nucleus is same as the number of positively charged protons in the nucleus. So it explains the overall electrical neutrality of an atom. This explains why some of the particles injected passed through because of the empty space. And this also explains why some particles were deflected, and it was because yung mga positive charge particles are confined dito sa nucleus. And because of that, Ernest Rutherford was also credited as the discoverer of protons. Now, isa sa mga sinabi ni Rutherford is that yung mga electrons ay parang umiikot lang around the nucleus. However, si Niels Bohr ayaw niyang maniwala. Kasi, if yung electrons ay umiikot around the nucleus, diba eventually it will collide with the nucleus. He did his part and studied a lot about the atoms. And he came up with his own model, and he proposed that electrons should orbit in different energy levels. So ito yung model niya, class, yung KLMN, kalamansi, na energy levels. Again ha, KLMN, kalamansi, energy levels. So basically, yung point niya lang ay yung mga electrons rides on these energy levels. If they want to jump to other levels, it would require a certain amount of energy to do so. So itong model ni Bohr, these completes our 3 atomic models. The first one is yung Thomson model by J.J. Thomson, yung plum pudding model. Second is the Rutherford model by Ernest Rutherford, the one he came up after the gold foil experiment. And the third one is the Bohr model by Niels Bohr, yung mga may energy levels na. So now we know about the electrons, protons, and nucleus. So to cut it short, the one who is credited for the discovery of neutrons ay si James Chadwick. Okay? So that's it for the extended history of chemistry. So the next topic that we will discuss are the 3 fundamental chemical laws. So now let's talk about the fundamental chemical laws. The 3 laws are: number 1, law of conservation of mass by Antoine Lavoisier. Number 2, law of definite proportions by Joseph Proust. And number 3 is the law of multiple proportions by John Dalton. So itong law of conservation of mass, we are very familiar with this. Ito yung mass can neither be created nor destroyed. So you cannot create something out of nothing, and you must start and end with the same amount of mass. Okay, so I will assume okay na tayo dito. The second one is the law of definite proportions by Joseph Proust. He said that a given chemical compound always contains the same elements in the exact same proportions by mass. So for example, may H2O ka. So for hydrogen, you have 2 atoms, and for oxygen, you have 1 atom. Meaning to say, in any sample of water, 2:1 yung ratio ni hydrogen atoms to oxygen atoms. Now, the same concept applies to the mass as per the law of definite proportions. So, di ba for hydrogen, may 2 AMU ka. And for oxygen is 16 AMU. So, wait lang. Saan ba to galing na values, ma'am? So, yung 2, di ba 1 AMU ang mass ni hydrogen, times 2, kasi 2 atoms, so 2 AMU. While yung 60 naman is ang mass ni oxygen kung titignan nyo sa periodic table, and times 1 lang kasi 1 atom lang siya. So, dividing 2 over 16, you get 1 over 8 or 1:8. So, itong 1:8, ito yung mass ratio ni hydrogen to oxygen. This means that in any sample of water, yung mass of oxygen is 8 times that of the mass of hydrogen. Or another way of saying it is that in any sample of water, it contains 11.11% hydrogen and 88.89% oxygen by mass. The last one is the law of multiple proportions by John Dalton. So sabi niya, whenever the same 2 elements form more than one compound, the different masses of one element that combine with the same mass of the other element are in the ratio of small whole numbers. Medyo complicated, pero let's break it down. So, whenever the same two elements, that's element A and B, form more than one compound, so say for example compound AB and AB2, the different masses of one element that combine with the same mass of the other element, so sabi niya may isang element daw na different masses, in this case si element B, and yung other element, which is in this case si element A, ay same or fixed yung mass niya. Okay? Are in the ratio of small whole numbers. So finally, kapag yung element with a different mass, si element B, ay kukunin natin yung ratio. Ang ratio daw niya ay small whole numbers. So let's repeat. If elements A and B react to form two compounds, AB and AB2, the different masses of B that combines with the fixed mass of A can be expressed as a ratio of small whole numbers. So for example, may elements ka na C and O, carbon and oxygen. Tapos combine mo sila to form carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide. And let's say, yung carbon mo is 1 gram. Ibig sabihin, you need 1.33 grams of oxygen to form carbon monoxide. And on the other hand, you need 2.66 grams of oxygen to form carbon dioxide. So, itong mga values na to, these are computed values ha. So, yung solutions niya is ito. So, next is, if you are to take the ratio of 2.66 and 1.33, yung ratio na makukuha mo is 2, which is a small whole number. Ang next na pag-uusapan natin ay ang periodic table of elements. And ang periodic table of elements ay devised by Dmitry Mendeleev. And yung nagre-review ako way back 2018, honestly, di ko din memorize lahat ng names ng groups and elements kasi for me, parang hindi siya worth it. So as easy is, siguro ito na lang na part ang tandaan nyo. Okay? The periodic table is arranged in order of atomic number, so basic. And ito sila is ang metals, non-metals, and in between are the metalloids. Next is that ito sila ay conductors, dito ay insulators, and in between ay semiconductors. So as you can see, yung silicon at germanium natin ay under both metalloids and semiconductors. Okay? So next is we have periods and groups. Ang period ay isang horizontal row sa periodic table. So, yung period number mo ay equal to the number of shells. So, period 1, 1 shell. Period 2, 2 shells. Period 3, 3 shells, and so on. Yung group naman, sila ay vertical rows of the periodic table. So, ang group number mo is equal to the number of valence electrons. Pero yung i-consider nyo lang ay ito sila ng mga vertical rows. So, group 1, 1 valence electron. Group 2, 2 valence electrons. Group 3, 3 valence electrons, and so on. So, for example, silicon. Period 3, group 4, 3 shells, and 4 valence electrons. So, may mga trends ang periodic table of elements. So, gaya ng history ni chemistry, may short version and extended version din ako sa lecture na to. So, yung short version is this. Atomic radius is increasing downward to the left, where francium has the largest atomic radius. Ionization energy is increasing upward to the right, where helium has the highest ionization energy. Electron affinity is increasing upward to the right, where chlorine has the highest electron affinity. And lastly, electronegativity is increasing upward to the right, where fluorine has the highest electronegativity. So, kung tinatamad na kayo, looks fam na lang. Okay? Pero if gusto nyo matuto at malaman kung ano ang reason behind kung bakit ganun ang trend, so I suggest you keep on watching. Okay? So, let's start with the atomic radius. Yung trend niya is increasing downward. So, check muna natin yung left to right. Bakit ba decreasing from left to right? Okay? So, di ba class from left to right, atomic number increases. Hence, yung number of protons increases. So, kapag yung number of protons increases, yung nuclear charge niya increases as well. And because of the increase in nuclear charge, it attracts the electron more strongly, pulling them closer to the nucleus. Ibig sabihin, class, the more na mas marami yung protons mo, the more na mas malakas yung attraction niya ng mga electrons. So effectively, parang liliit din yung atomic size dahil mas lumapit pa yung electrons papuntang nucleus. So I hope that makes sense. Okay? So next is from top to bottom. So from top to bottom, increasing. Now, diba, from top to bottom, the number of shell increases. So the distance between the outermost shell and the nucleus increases. So kung i-compare mo ang atom na may isang shell versus 3 shells, by mata-mata, sino ba sa kanila yung may mas malaking atomic size? Yung mas madaming shells. Okay? So that explains why the trend is increasing downward to the left. Next is we have the ionization energy. Ionization energy is a measure of how much energy is required to remove an electron from a neutral atom, which also is the measure of the tendency of an atom to resist the loss of electron. Meaning to say, the higher energy required to remove an atom, the higher the ionization energy. Okay, again ha? The higher energy required to remove an atom, the higher the ionization energy. So it talks about removing an atom. So from left to right, increasing. Okay, so diba from left to right, the atomic radius decreases. Therefore, yung distance between the outer electrons and the nucleus decreases. Now, according to Coulomb's law, kapag maliit yung distance between two charges, yung force of attraction ay tataas. So, meaning to say, dito sa right side, mas mataas yung force of attraction, hence mas mahirap i-remove yung electrons. So, kapag mas mahirap i-remove ang electrons, kailangan mong mas mag-effort or mas mag-exert ng energy para ma-remove, hence mas higher ang ionization energy niya. Another analogy for this is yung the boat is sinking, group yourselves into 8. So isipin nyo na lang na yung mga electrons ay naglalaro ng the boat is sinking, tapos group yourselves into 8. So for example, ikaw si beryllium, group 2. Meaning to say may dalawang valence electrons lang. So isipin nyo, the boat is sinking, group yourselves into 8, pero dalawa lang kayo. So diba hindi mo na kailangan mag-effort pa para sabihan yung dalawa na umalis at maghanap ng ibang group. Pero if ikaw si fluorine, so group 7, meaning to say 7 valence electrons. So the boat is sinking, group yourselves into 8, diba isa na lang yung kulang. So kung itong electron na ito ay pipilitin mong i-remove, diba mahihirapan ka kasi ayaw niya. Kasi diba isa na lang ang kulang para makomplete nila yung 8. So meaning, mas kailangan mong mag-effort or mag-exert ng energy to remove this electron. Hence, mas mataas yung ionization energy. Okay, make sense? So next is yung top to bottom. So top to bottom is decreasing. So diba from top to bottom, atomic radius increases. So yung distance between the outer electrons and the nucleus increases. So F is equal to KQQ over R squared. So kapag mas malaki yung distance, mas mahina yung force of attraction. Therefore, it's easier to remove the outermost electron. Next is yung electron affinity. So increasing upward to the right. And by definition, electron affinity of an element is the energy given off when an electron is added to the neutral atom. It also refers to the measure of the willingness of an atom to receive an electron. Okay, so it talks about the willingness of an atom to receive an electron, and it also talks about energy. So just remember na kung mas malakas yung attraction of electron to the atom, mas greater din yung energy released. So from left to right, di ba increasing? So from left to right, atomic radius decreases. So F equal to KQQ over R squared. So kapag mas maliit ang distance, mas malakas yung attraction. And kapag mas malakas yung attraction, mas greater yung energy released. And kapag mas malaki yung energy released, mas malaki yung electron affinity niya. Make sense? So kung gagamitin natin yung the boat is sinking na analogy, so the boat is sinking, group yourselves into 8, yung dito sa right side, willing na willing sila to accept electrons kasi mas malapit na silang makumpleto. Okay, so it talks about the willingness. Now, from top to bottom decreasing. Now, di ba from top to bottom, atomic radius increases. F equal to KQQ over R squared. Kapag mas malaki yung distance, mas hihina yung attraction. Kapag mas mahina ang attraction, mas maliit yung energy released, hence mas mababa yung electron affinity. And the last trend is yung electronegativity. Electronegativity is the ability of an atom in a molecule to attract shared electrons to itself in a covalent bond. So same trend sila ni electron affinity, pero magkaiba lang yung definition. So looks from na lang. Electronegativity speaks of ability, while electron affinity talks about energy or willingness. Okay, so looks from na lang. Ang elements, yung building blocks niya ay atoms, while atoms naman contains protons, neutrons, and electrons. So makikita nyo sa periodic table nyo class yung mga ganitong figures. So 23 and A11. So ito ay yung mass number A, that is equal to the number of protons plus the number of neutrons, while ito ay ang atomic number Z, that is equal to the number of protons only. So take note lang na yung number of protons is unique to each element. So yung number of protons defines kung anong klaseng element siya. So for example, 23 and A11. Now let's try to identify the number of protons, neutrons, and electrons. So the number of electrons is 11 kasi 11 yung atomic number niya. Yung number of neutrons is 23 minus 11, that is 12. Yung number of electrons naman is 11. Why 11? Because atoms are neutral in charge. So kapag neutral, that means the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons. Hence, in this case, 11 yung number of electrons. So try natin to another example. 12C6. The number of protons is equal to 6. The number of neutrons is equal to 12 minus 6, that is 6. And last is the number of electrons is 6. Kasi diba neutral in charge siya, so dapat equal lang siya sa number of protons. Pero what if for example, 26Al13, 3+. So ba't may 3+, ma'am? So ito class, this is an ion. Ions are kapag yung atom either gains or loses electrons. Positive ion ka or cation if you lose an electron. Why? For example, may 4 ka na protons and may 4 ka na electrons. So, neutral in charge ka. Pero what if you lose an electron? Sino yung mas madami? Yung protons. Hence, positive ion ka. Negative ion or anion ka if you gain an electron. So, if may 4 ka na protons and 4 ka na electrons, then you gain another electron. Sino ang mas madami? Yung electrons. Hence, negative ion ka. So, take note lang class ha, yung electrons ang nagigain or ang nilulose, hindi protons. Now, palatandaan lang, positive ions, positive, negative ions, and negative. So, for example, itong 26Al13 3+, yung number of protons na ay 13, number of neutrons niya ay 26 minus 13, that is 14. Yung electrons niya ay 13 minus 3, so 10. Bakit minus 3? Kasi positive ion siya. Meaning to say, nag-lose siya ng electrons. Nag-lose siya ng 3 electrons. So another example is this, 16O8, 2 minus. So number of protons is 8. Number of neutrons is 16 minus 8, that is 8. The number of electrons is 8 plus 2, that is 10. Bakit plus 2? Kasi negative ion siya. Meaning to say, nag-gain siya ng 2 electrons. And lastly, may monoatomic ions and polyatomic ions tayo. So, yung monoatomic ions, these are individual atoms like Na plus and Cl minus. While yung polyatomic ions, these are group of atoms like OH minus and NH4 plus. So, yung next na i-discuss natin ay isotopes. So, yung isotopes, tandaan lang ng definition niya, same atomic number but different atomic weight. For example, 1H1, 2H1, 3H1. So, same atomic number but different atomic weight. Next is isobars. So, same sa atomic mass, but different atomic number. For example, 13 and 7, 13C6. So, same mass, but different atomic number. Last is ang isotones. So, these are elements with the same number of neutrons. So, for example, 13 and 7 and 12C6. So, 13 minus 7 is 6 and 12 minus 6 is 6. So, same number of neutrons. So, ang atomic mass, other names niya ay atomic weight, average atomic mass, and relative atomic mass. So, by definition, ang atomic mass is the weighted average of the masses of its isotopes. And ang unit niya is atomic mass unit or AMU. So, ano bang ibig sabihin ng weighted average? Now, para mas maintindihan, solve tayo ng isang problem. So, for example, you are asked to solve for the atomic mass of silver. So, yung given problem ay isotopes niya ay 107 Ag and 109 Ag. So, given yung mga mass and abundance niya. Now, ano ang ibig sabihin ng abundance? So, yung silver, may dalawang isotopes. Kung ito yung silver sa buong mundo, 51.84% niyan ay isotope 107 Ag and ang 48.16% niyan ay ang 109 Ag. Okay? Bale, yung solution natin is ganito. Atomic mass of silver is equal to 106.90509 times 51.84% plus 108.90476 times 48.16%. That is equal to 107.868 AMU. So, ito yung weighted average ng mga isotopes and that is equal to the atomic mass of silver. Diba mass number is equal to the number of protons plus the number of neutrons? Pero bakit hindi ba kasali sa formula ng mass number yung number of electrons? Using your calculator, constant 01 is ang mass of protons. That is 1.67262 times 10 raised to negative 27. Constant 2, mass of neutron, 1.67493 times 10 raised to negative 27. And constant 3, ang mass of electron, 9.10938 times 10 raised to negative 31. Now, mass of proton divided by mass of electron is 1836.15. That means to say that protons are 1836.15 times heavier than electrons. Next, mass of neutron divided by mass of electrons is 1838.68. That means to say that neutrons are 1838.68 times heavier than electrons. So as you can see, super liit ng mass of electrons kung i-compare mo siya with protons and neutrons. And that explains why hindi siya kasali dun sa formula ng mass number kasi ang mass of electrons is negligible compared with protons or neutrons. So our next topic ay ang mole concept. By definition, a mole is a scientific unit for measuring large quantities of very small entities such as atoms, molecules, or other particles. So kung ang 1 dozen ay equal to 12, ang 1 mole naman ay equal to 6.022 times 10 raised to 23 atoms or molecules or particles. Again ang 1 mole is equal to 6.022 times 10 raised to 23. So, instead na sabihin natin yung buong number na 6.022 times 10 raised to 23, para mapadali buhay natin, sabihin mo na lang 1 mole. Okay? So, itong 6.022 times 10 raised to 23, yan ay ang Avogadro's number. And that is constant 24 sa calculator. So, number of moles, may formula yan. That is, number of moles is equal to mass in grams divided by the molar mass. So, let's solve one problem para mas maintindihan. How many moles are there in 1 kilogram of water and how many molecules does it have? Where the atomic mass of hydrogen is 1 and oxygen is 16. So, number of moles is equal to mass in grams divided by molar mass. Mass in grams is equal to 1,000 grams. Molar mass is 1 times 2 plus 16, that is 18 grams per mole. So, 1,000 grams divided by 18 grams per mole, that is equal to 55.56 moles. So, take note, moles pa lang yan ha. So, kung gusto mong kukunin yung number of molecules, you need to multiply it by the Avogadro's number. So, 55.56 times the Avogadro's number, that is constant 24 sa calculator, that is equal to 3.3456 times 10 raised to 25 molecules. So, our next topic ay compounds. Compounds are two or more elements like H2O, CO2, HCl, and NaCl. Yung building blocks niya are molecules. Now, ang compounds ay may dalawang klaseng chemical formulas. First is ang molecular formula, which is an exact formula. Second is the empirical formula, which is the simplest form. For example, ethylene. Yung molecular formula niya ay C2H4, pero we can divide this by 2, so it becomes CH2. So ito yung empirical formula niya. So kapag ECE ka, usually ito yung mga problem solving sa chemistry na lumalabas sa board exam. Pero I'm not sure if up to this moment ganun pa din. Pero yung time ko last October 2018 ay ito talaga yung majority sa questions for chemistry. So let's try to solve one problem. Calculate the empirical formula of a compound with a percent composition of 52.17% carbon, 13.05% hydrogen, and 34.75% oxygen. So step number 1 is to get the mass. So let's assume mass is 100 grams. For carbon, you have 100 grams times 52.17%, that is 52.17 grams. For hydrogen, you have 100 grams times 13.05%, that is 13.05 grams. For oxygen, you have 100 grams times 34.75%, that is 34.75 grams. So, ang reason kung bakit 100 grams yung assumed mass natin ay para mas madali. Kung ilan yung percent composition, yun na din yung mass. Step number 2 is to get the number of moles. Take note, class, that the number of moles is equal to mass in grams divided by molar mass. So, for carbon, 52.17 divided by 12, that is equal to 4.3475. Hydrogen, 13.05 divided by 1, that is equal to 13.05. Oxygen, 34.75 divided by 15, that is equal to 2.1719. Step number 3 is divide by the lowest number. So, yung lowest number natin from step 2 is 2.1719. So, ito silang tatlo, we will divide it by 2.1719. So, for carbon, 4.3475 divided by 2.1719, that is equal to 2. Hydrogen, that is 13.05 divided by 2.1719, that is 6. Oxygen is 2.1719 divided by 2.1719, that is 1. So, yung final answer natin ay C2H6O. Now, pwede mo din itong i-reverse engineering since may choices naman din sa board exam. So, kung reverse engineering, ang gagawin mo lang ay kukunin yung percent composition from the choices. So, di ba yung answer natin is C2H6O. So, to get the percent composition of carbon, that is 12 times 2 divided by 12 times 2 plus 1 times 6 plus 16, that is equal to 52.17%. To get the percent composition of hydrogen, that is 6 times 1 divided by 12 times 2 plus 1 times 6 plus 16, that is equal to 13.04%. And last, to get the percent composition of oxygen, that is 16 divided by 12 times 2 plus 1 times 6 plus 16, that is equal to 34.78%. So as you can see, though not exactly equal, pero since almost equal din naman, so okay lang. So definitely, itong C2H6O is the correct answer. Our next topic is solutions. So solute plus solvent is equal to a solution. Itong solute, ito yung substance na nadidissolve. So, for example, salt and water. Salt is the solute and water is the solvent. And take note, yung water is what we call the universal solvent. Okay? So, for solutions na topic, this is more on problem solving. So, just remember the formulas under this topic. So, ito yung mga commonly used formulas na na-encounter ko dati. Pero take note class na madami pa to, so research na lang. Now, let's try to solve one problem. 90.10 grams of C2H12O6 with a molar mass of 18.2 grams per mole is dissolved in 250 milliliters of solution. Calculate the molarity of the solution. Okay. So, molarity is moles of solute divided by liters of solution. Moles of solute is mass in grams divided by the molar mass. So, that's 90.10 grams divided by 180.2 grams per mole. So, we have 0.5 moles of solute. Now, we have molarity is equal to 0.5 moles divided by 250 times 10 raised to negative 3. That is equal to 2 molar, capital M. So, take note ha, 250 times 10 raised to negative 3, hindi 250. Kasi di ba dapat naka-millimeter siya, not liters. So, under sa solutions na topic, importante lang talaga na alam nyo yung formulas and yung tama na pag-apply or paggamit sa formula. Okay? Yung substances natin can be classified as either base or acids. So, may tatlong tao na nag-define kung ano yung base at acid. Si Arrhenius, Bronsted-Lowry, and si Lewis. First muna si Arrhenius. Sabi niya na ang acid daw forms H+ when mixed with water, while ang base forms OH- when mixed with water. So, ibig sabihin, kapag may substance ka na imimix mo sa tubig, kapag ito ay bubuo ng H+ ions, acid ka. Pero pag ang nabuo nito ay mga OH- na ions, ay base ka. Okay, so halimbawa ng acid ay hydrochloric acid, HCl, sulfuric acid, H2SO4, while mga halimbawa naman ng base ay sodium hydroxide, NaOH, and potassium hydroxide, KOH. So, by mata-mata, madali lang ma-identify which is which. OH and H. So, for Bronsted-Lowry, either proton donor or proton acceptor ka. So, para mas madaling i-remember, di ba kapag acid ka, bubuo ka ng H+, bumuo ka ng H+, nag-form ka ng H+. So, question, are you a proton donor or are you a proton acceptor? You are a proton donor, H+. Okay? So, yung base, kabaliktaran lang yan. So, proton acceptor to. Make sense? Kay Lewis naman, ay either electron pair acceptor or donor ka. So, kapag base ka, di ba bubuo ka ng OH-? OH-. So, question, are you an electron pair donor or acceptor? Electron pair donor ka kasi nag-form ka or bumuo ka ng OH-, negative. Okay? So, ito, kabaliktaran lang. So, electron pair acceptor. Okay? So, ito naman class, mga common facts lang for objective type of questions. Yung acid sour taste and changes color of litmus from blue to red, while yung base ay bitter taste and changes the color of litmus from red to blue. So, for this topic, may 3 formulas kayo na dapat i-memorize. pH is equal to negative log of H+, POH is equal to negative log of OH-, and pH plus POH is equal to 14. Etong bracket na to, meaning yan ay concentration. Okay, so ngayon kukunin natin yung range ng pH and POH values of acid and base. So, pH value muna tayo ni acid. So, di ba, kapag acid, H+. So, mataas yung concentration ng H+ mo. So, logarithm of a large value is mataas, multiply it with a negative ay bababa. So, yung pH ng acid ay less than 7 or mababa lang. Pero kapag base ka, yung H+ na concentration mo ay mababa. Kasi 'di ba pag base ka, OH- yung na-form mo, hindi H+. So again, kapag base ka, yung H+ concentration mo is mababa. So logarithm of a small value is small or negative. Multiply mo ng negative, magiging positive, so tataas. So kapag base ka, yung pH value mo ay mataas or greater than 7. Next is pOH values naman. So kapag acid ka, yung OH- mo ay maliit kasi 'di ba H+ yung na-form mo. So logarithm of a small value is small or negative. Multiply mo ng negative, magiging positive, so tataas. So kapag acid ka, yung pOH value mo ay mataas or greater than 7. Last is pOH value ng base. So kapag base ka, mataas yung concentration mo of OH-. So logarithm of a large value ay malaki. Multiply mo ng negative sign, magiging negative, so bababa. So kapag base ka, yung pOH value mo ay mababa or less than 7. So let's try to solve one problem. Calculate the pH of NaOH solution with a concentration of 4 times 10 raised to negative 3 molar. So take note ha, may tatlong formulas tayo. pH is equal to negative log H+, pOH is equal to negative log OH-, and pH plus pOH is equal to 14. So first step. First step is pOH is equal to negative log of 4 times 10 raised to negative 3 molar. Ma'am, bakit pOH yung gamit mo? Na pH value yung required sa problem. So take note, yung pH and pOH na formulas ay same lang. So kahit na pH value yung tanong, yung unang makukuha mo na value ay ang pOH kasi yung given ay NOH, OH, base. So yung 4 times 10 raised to negative 3 molar na concentration class, ay yan yung concentration ni OH-. Okay? So, solving for that, we get pOH is equal to 2.4. So, again, remember class, diba? Kapag base ka, yung pOH value mo ay less than 7. So, tama to kasi 2.4 is less than 7. Next is gamitin natin itong formula na ito. pH plus pOH equal to 14. So, to get the value for pH value, we have pH is equal to 12 minus pOH. That is equal to 11.6. So, according sa kinetic energy theory of gas, yung kinetic energy of gases is directly proportional to temperature. So, may dalawang formulas ako dito na I want you to memorize. First is we have Ke is equal to 3 over 2 kT. So, ito ay for monoatomic gas. So, example sa mga monoatomic gas ay yung mga noble gases natin. And take note lang na K is the Boltzmann constant. That is constant 25 in your calculator. The second one is Ke is equal to 5 over 2 kT. So, ito ay for diatomic gases. So, kailangan alam nyo kung sino-sino yung mga diatomic gases natin. Have no fear of ice cold beer. Again ha, have no fear of ice cold beer. That is hydrogen gas, nitrogen gas, fluorine, oxygen, iodine, chlorine, and bromine. Okay? So, memorize that one. So, back to our formula, as you can see, yung variable lang natin ay ang temperature. 3 over 2 is a constant, 5 over 2 is a constant, and K is a constant. So, yung temperature lang yung variable. Ibig sabihin, kapag may dalawang different gases ka at the same temperature, yung average kinetic energy niya ay same lang. Okay? So, the kinetic energy of A is equal to the kinetic energy of B. And if we keep in mind that the kinetic energy is 1/2 mv squared, so that is 1/2 MAVA squared is equal to 1/2 MBVB squared. So, cancel yung 1/2. you are left with MAVA squared equal to MBVB squared. Simplify, VA squared over VB squared is equal to MB over MA. And di ba class, number of moles is equal to mass divided by molar mass. So if we assume 1 mole, that is molar mass is equal to mass. So apply this one to the equation. You have molar mass of B over molar mass of A. So after simplifying, you get VA over VB is equal to square root of molar mass of B over molar mass of A. So this equation is the Graham's law. And usually, ito na equation, ginagamit ito sa mga problems ng rate of diffusion or effusion. So, quick definition of terms lang. When we say diffusion, this is when yung molecules go from high concentration to low concentration until it reaches uniform concentration. While sa effusion naman, it is when particles escape through holes or tiny openings. Okay, so back to our formula. VA over VB is equal to square root of molar mass of B over molar mass of A. So, ibig sabihin lang, kapag mas mabigat ka, mas mabagal ka. Pero kapag mas magaan ka, mas mabilis ka. Make sense? So, for example, hydrogen gas and oxygen gas. So, that's VH squared over VO squared is equal to square root of 32 over 2. That is equal to 4. Ibig sabihin lang class, na yung average velocity ng hydrogen molecules ay 4 times greater than that of oxygen molecules. Kasi nga 'di ba, mas magaan si hydrogen, so dapat siya yung mas mabilis. Okay? So take note lang class, na kahit nasabihin natin na same yung kinetic energy ng dalawang gas kasi they are at the same temperature, pero yung average velocity nila ay hindi the same. Last topic ay ang root mean square speed of a molecule. So we have Ke is equal to 3 over 2 kT and we have Ke is equal to 1/2 mv squared. Equate mo silang dalawa, you have 1/2 mv squared is equal to 3 over 2 kT. That is velocity is equal to square root of 3 kT over m, where mass is in kilograms. So this one is one formula. Okay, so memorize. Now, okay, derive. K is equal to R over NA. Boltzmann constant is equal to gas constant divided by the Avogadro's number. So we have V is equal to 3RT over M times the Avogadro's number. And remember sa mole concept na discussion that number of moles is equal to mass over molar mass. And if you want to get the number of molecules, just multiply it by the Avogadro's number. And let's assume na 1 mole of gas lang. So that's 1 is equal to mass over molar mass times Avogadro's number. Rearranging, you have molar mass is equal to mass times Avogadro's number. So substitute sa equation, you have velocity is equal to square root of 3RT over m, where molar mass is in kilograms per mole. So this is another equation. Okay, so you have 2 equations for this topic. So for example, calculate the root mean square speed of HCl gas at 100 degrees Celsius, assuming it to be ideal. Now, gamitin natin yung second equation, that is VRMS is equal to square root of 3RT over molar mass. And your molar mass is 1 plus 35.5, that is 36.5 grams per mole. Okay, so we have VRMS is equal to square root of 3RT times 100 plus 273 para Kelvin. Kasi di ba dapat absolute temperature yung gamitin. And then divided by 36.5 grams per mole times 1 kilogram over 1,000 grams. Kasi di ba dapat naka-kilogram per mole yung molar mass mo for this equation. So calculate, you get VRMS is equal to 504.877 meters per second.